Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. In this video, we'll be discussing the Ministry of Magic, or more specifically, the Minister of Magic who oversees all of the operations of the Ministry. The Ministry of Magic is of course the primary form of government in the magical world, at least in the UK. We do know that other countries have a similar structure, though they may be named differently. Like a Muggle government, the Ministry's responsibilities are vast, and are massively important in sustaining law and order in the magical world. There are many different departments inside of the Ministry, including the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, the Department of Magical Accidents and Catastrophes, the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures, the Department of International Magical Cooperation, the Department of Magical Transportation, the Department of Magical Games and Sports, and the Department of Mysteries. The Minister for Magic is of course the primary leader of the Ministry of Magic. This is the highest rank possible inside of the Ministry and is comparable to the Prime Minister or President of a country. One massive responsibility of the Minister of Magic is to meet with the Muggle Prime Minister when necessary. One interesting fact that I never knew is that the Muggle Prime Minister has a magical portrait of Ulick Gamp, the First Minister, in his office in number 10 Downing Street. If there is an emergency and the Minister for Magic needs to meet the Muggle Prime Minister, the Prime Minister is alerted via Ulick. So the Minister for Magic has a lot of responsibility, and it's a very prestigious position, which makes me wonder, how are they elected? I don't recall the books or films referencing this much, so I did a bit of digging. It turns out that the magical government follows democracy, and that the Minister is democratically elected. This means that the public gets a say in who makes the shots in the wizarding world. However, it's also worth mentioning that in times of crisis, their standard democratic format goes out the window a little bit. If you didn't know already, Dumbledore has been asked to take the reins as Minister for Magic multiple times, but each time he has refused as he is content with his post as headmaster of Hogwarts. What's also interesting is that unlike most Muggle governments, there is no limit to a minister's term. With that being said, there is a requirement for them to hold elections at a maximum interval of every 7 years. It is not uncommon for a Minister for Magic to hold his post for a substantial amount of time, relative to Muggle government standards.
So, you probably already know about a few of the ministers, but I doubt you know about all of them. The Ministry of Magic was formed in 1707, so as you can imagine, there have been quite a few faces. Starting at the beginning, here are all of the ministers for magic. Number 1. Ulick Gamp. Ulick Gamp was the original Minister for Magic. He was in office from 1707 to 1718, and he spearheaded the transition from Wizards' Council, which preceded the Ministry, to the Ministry. He was previously head of the Wisengamot, and he is famous for founding the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Number 2. Damocles Rowle. Damocles Rowle was the second Minister for Magic and had served from 1718 to 1726. Rowle was known to be tough on Muggles, and this was a big part of his election campaign. He was eventually censored by the International Confederation of Wizards, and was eventually forced to step down. Number 3. Perseus Parkinson. Perseus Parkinson was the third Minister for Magic, and he served from 1726 to 1733. Parkinson attempted to pass a bill that would make it illegal for wizards and witches to marry Muggles. This was unpopular with the wizarding community, and he was voted out. Eldritch Diggory. Eldritch was the fourth Minister for Magic, and he served from 1733 to 1747. He was famous for establishing an Auror recruitment program. He was never voted out, but tragically died in office from dragonpox. Number 5. Albert Boot. Albert Boot was the fifth Minister for Magic, and he served from 1747 to 1752. He was popular with the wizarding community, very likable, but also not very capable. He resigned after he poorly managed a goblin rebellion. Number 6. Basil Flack. Basil was the sixth Minister for Magic, and he only served a term of 2 months. He resigned after the rebellious goblins joined forces with werewolves. It was too much for Basil to handle. Number 7. Hephaestus Gore. Hephaestus Gore was the seventh Minister for Magic and served for 18 years from 1752 to 1770. He is notably one of the earliest known Aurors. Gore achieved quite a lot during his term and successfully managed a number of magical revolts. He was also responsible for a much-needed renovation and reinforcement of Azkaban prison. Number 8. Maximillian Crowdy. Maximillian Crowdy was the 8th Minister for Magic and served 11 years from 1770 to 1781. Crowdy was a charismatic leader who was instrumental in the mitigation of pure-blood extremist groups who were intent on attacking Muggles. He mysteriously died in office. Number 9. Porteus Knatchbull. Porteus Knatchbull was the 9th Minister for Magic and served 8 years from 1781 to 1789. Knatchbull was known for his relationship with Lord Frederick North, the Muggle Prime Minister of the time. North sought Knatchbull's help with King George III's emerging mental instability. Number 10. Unctuous Osbert. Osbert was the 10th Minister for Magic and served from 1789 to 1798. He was not a very well-rounded leader and was far too influenced by purebloods of wealth and status. I'm sure Lucius would have loved him. Number 11. Artemisia Lufkin. Artemisia Lufkin was the 11th Minister for Magic and served from 1798 to 1811. She was the first ever female minister. She's known for establishing the Department of International Magical Cooperation and lobbied heavily for a Quidditch World Cup hosted in Britain. Number 12. Grogan Stump. Grogan Stump was the 12th Minister for Magic and served 8 years from 1811 to 1819. Stump is known for establishing the Department of Magical Games and Sports. The inspiration for this stemmed from his love for Quidditch. Number 13. Josephina Flint. Josephina Flint was the 13th Minister for Magic and served 8 years from 1819 to 1827. She was the second ever female minister. She was not particularly popular or progressive, as she was not fond of Muggles. Number 14. Ottaline Gambol. Ottaline Gambol was the 14th Minister for Magic and served from 1827 to 1835. Gambol was known for the establishment of committees investigating Muggle brainpower. Number 15. Rodolphous Lestrange. Rodolphous Lestrange is the ancestor of the Rodolphous Lestrange that you're probably thinking of. He was the 15th Minister for Magic and served from 1835 to 1841. He attempted to shut down the Department of Mysteries and eventually resigned due to health concerns. Some speculate that it was purely because he had trouble handling the position. Number 16. Hortensia Milliphutt. Hortensia Milliphutt was the 16th Minister for Magic and served 8 years from 1841 to 1849. She was very active in the introduction of legislation, but not all of it was good. This led to her political downfall. Number 17. Evangeline Orpington. Evangeline Orpington was the 18th Minister for Magic and served 6 years from 1849 to 1855. Interestingly enough, she was a good friend of Queen Victoria. The Queen never knew that Orpington was a witch. Number 18. Priscilla Dupont. Priscilla Dupont was the 18th Minister for Magic and served only 3 years from 1855 to 1858. Dupont hated the British Prime Minister at the time, Lord Palmerston, and caused so much trouble for him that she was forced to resign. Number 19. Dugald McPhail. Dugald McPhail was the 19th Minister for Magic and served 7 years from 1858 to 1865. McPhail was calm, reliable, steady, and just an all-around good minister. However, he was voted out at the maximum 7-year election interval. Number 20. Faris Spavin. Faris Spavin was the 20th Minister for Magic and the longest ever serving minister. Can you guess how long? His term was an extraordinary. Now write it in the comments. What's your guess? 38 years, and he served from 1865 to 1903. He survived an assassination attempt, which basically was just a kicking from an upset centaur. At age 147, it was gently suggested by the Wisengamot that he leave office. Number 21. Venusia Crickerly was the 21st Minister for Magic and the second ex-Auror to enter office. She served 9 years from 1903 to 1912. She died in a freak gardening accident that was mandrake-induced. I guess she wasn't wearing ear protection. Number 22. Archer Evermond. Archer Evermond was the 22nd Minister for Magic and served 11 years, from 1912 to 1923. Evermond's time in office, of course, coincided with the First Muggle World War. Evermond passed legislation forbidding witches, wizards from getting involved, but thousands defied him. Number 23. Lorcan MacLaird. Lorcan MacLaird was the 23rd Minister for Magic and served only 2 years, from 1923 to 1925. MacLaird was a reserved and gifted wizard, but not a particularly effective politician because of his nature. He was forced out of office because of his eccentricities. Number 24. Hector Fawley. Hector Fawley was the 24th Minister for Magic and served a long 14-year term, from 1925 to 1939. Fawley was mainly voted in because of his personality, which was a stark contrast to the former minister, MacLaird. Fawley, however, was not a particularly good minister, and did not handle the imminent threat of Gellert Grindelwald very well. He was ousted from office. Number 25. Leonard Spencer-Moon. Leonard Spencer-Moon was the 25th Minister for Magic and served from 1939 to 1948. He was solid as far as ministers go, and really worked his way up through the ranks in wizarding government. He had a sound working relationship with Muggle Prime Minister Winston Churchill. Number 26. Wilhelmina Tuft. Wilhelmina Tuft was the 26th Minister for Magic from 1948 to 1959. She was a very positive leader who oversaw the wizarding world during a time of peace. She died in office from an unknown to her Alahotzi-flavored fudge allergy. Number 27. Ignatius Tuft. Ignatius Tuft was the 27th Minister for Magic and served only 3 years, from 1959 to 1962. Ignatius took over for his mother, Wilhelmina, after her untimely death. Tuft was forced out of office after his highly controversial proposition to institute a Dementor breeding program. Could you imagine that? Number 28. Nobby Leach. Nobby Leach was the 28th Minister for Magic and the first that was a Muggle-born, a positive sign in the progression of wizarding government. He served from 1962 to 1968. He left office after contracting a mysterious illness. Number 29. Eugenia Jenkins. Eugenia Jenkins was the 29th Minister for Magic and served 7 years, from 1968 to 1975. During her time in office, there was a lot going on, from pureblood riots to squibs marches. On top of that, she had to deal with the first rise of Lord Voldemort. She was ousted from office as she was not up to the challenge of handling all of these issues. Number 30. Harold Mincham. Harold Mincham was the 30th Minister for Magic and served for 5 years, from 1975 to 1980. Harold tried his best to contain Lord Voldemort's rise to power, but was unsuccessful. This resulted in him being kicked out of office, and the rest will be read by Silas.
Number 31. Millicent Bagnold. Millicent Bagnold was the 31st Minister for Magic and served 10 years from 1980 to 1990. Bagnold was highly capable and served in office at the same time that the Potters were attacked by Lord Voldemort at Godric's Hollow. Bagnold left office with the closing remark, "I assert our inalienable right to party." Number 32. Cornelius Fudge. Hopefully we're getting into some more familiar territory here. Cornelius Fudge was the 32nd Minister for Magic and served from 1990 to 1996. Fudge had some questionable behavior during his time in office, the most questionable being his persistent denial of Voldemort's return. This denial cost Fudge his job. Number 33. Rufus Scrimgeour. Rufus Scrimgeour was the 33rd Minister for Magic and served from 1996 to 1997. He was the third ex-Auror to gain office and face an unfortunate death at the hands of Lord Voldemort. Number 34. Pius Thicknesse. Pius Thicknesse was the 34th Minister for Magic and served from 1997 to 1998. Pius's term was for the most part omitted from the records, as he was under the Imperious Curse for the duration of his time in office. Kingsley Shacklebolt was the 35th Minister for Magic and served from 1998 to 2019. He's known for overseeing the capture and containment of Death Eaters and Voldemort supporters after the Dark Lord's defeat. Shacklebolt was initially named Caretaker Minister, but was properly elected after all of his successors. Number 36. Hermione Granger. In 2019, Hermione took over for Shacklebolt and assumed the role of Minister for Magic. And that should cover about all of the ministers. What's interesting about reviewing them is that we can see that they, for the most part, got more and more progressive over time. Some of the original ministers were highly intolerant of Muggles, and even based their campaigns around their distaste for the Muggle world. Fast forward to 1962, and a Muggle-born Nobby Leach took office. Anyway, that's it for this video. Which ministers resonate most with you guys? Let me know down in the comment section below. Until next time, you're a wizard, Harry.